This is the Air Vac diff building video in which I will show you how to build a diff the way I do it and like some of the other team drivers do it. So what you have to do is you assemble the brand new diff. Regarding the assembly, I often receive questions about certain details of the assembly. So for instance, on the small O-rings that goes in the case, I use silicone oil on them. I don't use grease. As for the gears, you need to use a hobby knife sometimes to trim off the excess plastic from the mold. Normally it's very minor, but it can help to avoid any problems with the freeness of the diff inside the case. And furthermore, I don't use the small O-ring for sealing, I just use the gasket. I feel that's enough, and sometimes when the small O-ring expands in contact with oil, it can cause some leaking and it can cause some problems with the diff, so I just use the gasket for sealing. And furthermore, about the build, so on the back of the diff you can see here I made some tiny holes in the case. And why did I make these holes? I used a body reamer to make them, and it's because when I rebuild the diff, sometimes oil can come in through these holes where you screw down the top cover, and when oil gets stuck in there, when you thread the screw down, it can make the case strip. So making these tiny holes in the case, they actually avoid those kind of problems. So about the build itself, you need to fill the diff with oil. There's a lot of ways of making sure you have the same amount of oil every time, but the easiest way, if the diff is brand new, is to weigh it. So you just put it on the scale. So empty, it's 8.25, and I want to aim for a total of 1.4 to 1.5 grams of oil. So you just take the oil, fill it up, it's important to get the oil to go into these small holes on the outside of the gears, and not only in the center. So pay attention to these small holes, because obviously you'll be able to add oil there, which will affect the overall weight as well. So I just work a little bit of oil in there. A little bit more. Move it around with a flat screwdriver. Pop it on the scale. So that's 950, it means it's 1.3 grams instead of the 1.4, so I still need to add a tiny bit of oil to reach the 1.4, which I wanted to. So that's 9.6 now, it means it's 1.4, almost 1.5. And that's just the amount that I want, so put the scale away. Just wipe a little bit of excess oil from the top. Once that's done, you get the Air Vac ready. Take off the case. This is already fitted with the diff adapter that it comes with, so it's really tricky actually. Instead of the normal shock holder which you have inside, you can fit this small diff adapter, which makes your job a lot easier. So you just pop it in there. You seal it up, make sure it's sealed properly. And then switch on your power supply. And you can start pumping. You only need to apply the vacuum for a few seconds for it to reach the full effect. You can already see the bubbles start to move inside. And how do you tell that it's reached its full vacuum? I mean, you stop the vacuum, you start to lift it up, make sure it's completely sealed. And then, because this diff oil is actually 7K, it's quite heavy oil, it's gonna need a few minutes to release all the bubbles. So what you do is then you just wait till you stop seeing the bubbles coming out, and then you go on to the next step of the process. So once you stop seeing air bubbles coming out, just release the top button for the vacuum, take the vacuum out, take your diff out, it's ready to go. Put the vacuum away. What you do then is you carefully install the top case. Make sure the holes are lined up. Then I tighten the screws. I mean, this is a new case, so the threads are a little bit hard, but I thread them across from each other, this direction and then that direction, so that the top cover is completely lined up and completely square, which will avoid any leaking problems later on. Just tighten this down until it feels nice and tight, and yeah, make sure you don't strip the case. I mean, you should just tighten it down as far as is reasonable. You can feel that it's stopped there. And check again, all 4 screws. And that's done. In the future, I'm gonna post a video which shows you how to use the diff checker tool, which you can buy from several shops online. It's a really nice tool actually, and can measure the hardness of the diff in numbers instead of just feel. But stay tuned for that video, it's gonna come later on. But that's also a very important tool if you want to make sure that you have the right diff viscosity. But this is the way we do it with the Air Vac. Pretty simple really, but pretty convenient. And just one last thing to answer. Some guys, they ask me, what do I put for lubrication on the out drives against the case? So you can use a grease, but I actually prefer to use just the same oil that I use inside of the diff. So use silicone oil to lubricate the out drives against the plastic. Very important, because if you don't use any, it might have excessive wear. So yeah, pay attention to that and enjoy your build.